My name is Florence, and I'm a survivor of domestic violence. I'm a single mother of 4. I was married to their father for 9 years until domestic violence made me a single parent. Growing up, I was very ambitious. I wanted to have a good education, get a good career, get married to somebody I love, settle down, build a beautiful family, and just live a happy life. I thought I had that, but unfortunately it turned out not to be so. I'm talking about emotional abuse, financial abuse, physical, psychological abuse. I was called all kinds of names. I was called worthless, primitive, shit. I was told I wasn't capable of anything. I was even told that I am lower than a dog and that I am nasty, nastier than a snail. I was told this every day. And more so, I was even told that I was a prostitute. This was like my daily life. And it was hard. It was hard going through that every single day. He slapped me on the face for asking why he mixes his dirty clothes with clean ones for me to go wash them again. So it started like that, and it never got any better. It only got worse. That's the first day he put his hand on me, and from that day, he never stopped. I couldn't ask anything without him getting aggressive and putting his hand on me. My kids witnessed all of that, and that's what bothered me a lot. Yeah. That's what disturbed me a lot, because they saw all of this, and I felt like I wasn't responsible because I stayed there with them witnessing that. But the thing is, I had no way out because I had nobody else here. It was just me, him, and the children. It was very disturbing to me. I thought of every possible way for them not to, but every time he instead made sure he included them. He brought them into the midst of the abuse. There's been times that my little baby, who was less than a year, he would have him in his arm and punching me, and the child wailing, and that didn't mean anything to him. So they witnessed all of this, and it was the worst thing that I could think about, because they didn't deserve to be living under such an atmosphere. They always screamed at him to stop, because most of the time it wasn't like we were fighting, because there was never a time I even ever responded or ever hit him back. All the time he was the one hitting me, and the children were screaming and asking him to stop, wailing at the top of their voices. But he did what he did. I had nowhere to go because I didn't want to just live without thinking about the future. If I moved into somebody's home with my children, what will happen there? So I had no choice. I felt trapped because I really wanted to leave, but I couldn't leave. And I had to live with that abuse year in, year out, and the children experiencing that kind of traumatic situation every day. I felt very guilty, but I didn't know what else to do. I grew up as a girl who felt that women need to be respected. I'm that person who like to see men respect women, because women deserve respect. And so far, growing up, I saw women in relationships, no respect, and I hated that. So the moment he started abusing me and disrespecting me, with me giving him all the respect and love that anybody could get, the love died. I couldn't leave, partly because I was thinking of my children. I didn't want my children to grow without a dad, without their dad with them. And it looks like that was taken advantage of. It was looked upon as if I have no choice, I have to deal with it, and it like gave him the power to abuse me more. After abusing me, physically abusing me, then calling the police on me, and then the police come in and he tells them something else that has nothing to do with him abusing me or whatever he called them for. He decided to report me, send an email to ACS telling them that I am bringing in garbage and filling up the children's room with, and that's abuse. So ACS came to investigate. I knew nothing about ACS. I knew nothing about any agency in this country. I knew nothing that was going on in this American society because I was like caged. I didn't know anything happening. So the ACS came and they told me they are from the ACS. So I asked them, what is ACS? They said, I don't know ACS. I said, no. So they told me what they came to do. That pissed me off. For all these years that I was being abused, I was like protecting him, not reporting, not because I couldn't report, but just protecting his image, thinking that he would change. When he went to that extent to report me to the ACS, me learning who the ACS workers were, I knew that was serious. That was the moment I decided to tell the ACS about the abuse that had been going on. So at that moment, the ACS got involved. Even after the cops were involved, ACS came in, he still physically abused me. And I had never called the police, but I decided to call the police. At one point, they decided to go arrest him. They took him to the district attorney's office, assigned me an attorney, assigned me a caseworker. All these things were new to me. I never knew anything about anything like this. They told me that I have to apply for public assistance in order to get assistance. Every day I would go to the HRA center asking, can I find housing? How do they find housing here? When I went there, they realized it was a domestic violence case. They sent me to PATH in the Bronx. We went there and then they sent us to a women's shelter in Brooklyn. So now I had to move with the children from Manhattan to Brooklyn. Yeah. And that's how we got into shelter and that's how we got out of there, just by some chance. So after we left, they placed us into shelter. Right. At that time, I had started doing a certificate in journalism. When we got into shelter, I had to look for schools for my children. We had to do therapy. All the 5 of us had to do therapy. I had to take them to therapy every week, go to therapy myself every week. And as time went on, I told myself, I can't just continue like this. There was a lot of pressure. There was nobody to take care of my kids, and I had to continue with the journalism program I was doing. So I went and applied for daycare. Yeah. Nothing worked. Then the lady that I applied to, she kept on asking me, where is my voucher? I said, I don't know. What is a voucher? So at some point, that lady realized, the lady realized I did not even know what I was doing. And she told me, don't worry, I'll take care of them for you. So she took care of all my children till we moved out of that particular shelter. This lady took care of all my kids, feeding them while I went, because it was evening classes. I had classes from 6 to sometimes 10:30 in Manhattan. I had to travel to Brooklyn. She would wait for me until I'll come around 11 p.m. and pick up my kids. So she was like my savior at that time. The time that we had at that shelter expired. They sent us back to Path. We went to Path. They placed us in another shelter in the Bronx. I would not describe the state of that shelter because it's horrifying. 6 floors up, roach and rat infested. We stayed there for 6 days. For 6 days, we were going to Path every day with all our luggage and coming back to that apartment. After about a week, they moved us into another shelter back in Brooklyn. I had to be going through, trying to keep public assistance, making sure that my kids go to school, making sure that I take all the 4 of them to therapies. Luckily, the first 3, they had their therapist in the same building, so I did everything they scheduled at the same time. The little one, I had to take him separately to therapy. I had to go to my own therapy. At some point, I started thinking, I have to start applying to go back to college. So while in the shelter, I was applying to go back to grad school, but I only realized after I got into grad school that I wasn't ready, because if I got into that program, it wouldn't have worked. Then afterwards, I found Brooklyn College and said, okay, let me just go back and really do a real broadcast journalism program so that it can take me to where I want to. So I applied, and as I moved out of shelter, I started in Brooklyn College, and that's how things went from there. When we first moved into shelter, they were all 7 years old and down. It was so stressful. The children, when we just moved into shelter, they were acting up because they didn't know what was going on. They were having nightmares because there were times that they would relive all the things that they had experienced. It was very, very difficult trying to stabilize my kids, trying to get them to therapy, trying to get them to school, trying to get them just to get a normal life that every child needs to get. It was hard. I was so much under pressure, such that there were times that I was weeping on the street. But I told myself I don't have to continuously cry because I have my kids, they're looking up to me. I have to make sure that they eat. I have to make sure that they go to school. I have to make sure that they have a normal life.
Yeah.
And I tried by all means to make sure they don't never see me cry. So it was hard after we moved out. It was hard. And I told myself, we have to make it. We have to make it because, you know, just moving from a stable life to a life where you don't even know what tomorrow holds. You don't know what your life will be like tomorrow. Living in a shelter with nothing, not even knowing whether it was just a hopeless future. But I decided to tell myself, we are going to make it. I didn't know how we were going to make it, but I was just praying to God, telling God every day, this wasn't our lives. We have to make it with your help, God. I felt that I had to be strong for my children because there were times I would stand, things would be so hard on me, and then I'll turn and look at them, they'll stand there looking at me. I would just turn away and wipe my tears, and then I'll say, they are looking at me. I'm the one to give them a life, and their life is in my hands. Yeah. I just feel like keeping what I have been through and looking at where I am today, I'm so grateful every day that going through this situation, I've never felt depressed because I just try to keep a positive mind, just knowing that despite what I am going through, it will be well. So I've never felt depressed, and because I derive any kind of strategy that will keep me from being depressed because I didn't need to. Because I had some little fragile, vulnerable kids looking at me to get a life from. And I felt like, and as I was telling you, I feel like I owe the society a responsibility. And keeping what I went through, I don't know telling what I went through and how I overcame some of these things. I don't know what it could do to somebody who is in the same situation. When I see somebody going through that, I feel it. I feel it because I know exactly where it pinches. Yeah. Domestic violence is not good. During that period, we lived in 3 shelters. We first of all lived in a women's shelter in Brooklyn, and then at another shelter in the Bronx, and then back to another shelter in Brooklyn. So we lived all together in 3 shelters. And I will not even include the times that, the nights that we spent at PATH, and it's horrible.
Yeah.
I don't even want to think about PATH.
Right.
Because it's not a place anyone would like to be moving back and forth with, especially with very little kids, 4 little kids, dragging things back and forth. It wasn't easy.
Right.
That was one of the best days of my life because I never thought going through all the struggles, going through that's basically with nothing. When I finally got a voucher and found an apartment and we moved into, it was the most awesome feeling. We moved out of there with nothing. There was no bed, there was just nothing. We just moved into a 2-bedroom apartment with 4 empty walls. We just 4 walls, nothing. When we just moved out, my bed was boxes that I broke and put on the floor. And I slept on those boxes on the floor for weeks upon weeks upon weeks. But you know what? I felt so much at peace because nobody would come in screaming at me, calling me names, calling me all kinds of names, belittling me, putting me down. I felt like that was the most peaceful moment, even though I was not sleeping on a bed. I was sleeping on the floor on boxes. My last child, the daycare he was going to, we had a caseworker there who was also trying to help me to find an apartment. She told me she and her husband, they have a mattress that they hadn't used, a big mattress that they hadn't used, that they can bring that mattress to me and we start off with that. And you know what? That mattress was my bed on the floor for almost 3 years. That was my bed for 3 years, and I felt at peace with that. So that's how we moved out of the shelter, and then until after 2 years we moved to where we live now. But that was my experience, moving out of the shelter with nothing, but it was okay.
Yeah.
I am that person. I think a lot about the future. I don't just act like this without thinking, but what lies ahead. What I focused on was trying to make sure that I make a life here for myself and my kids. And that's where I invested all my time, all my energy. My kids were my top priority at that time. And even my own priorities, I put them aside because to me, in a domestic violence situation, kids are always caught in between with no fault of theirs. They didn't ask for what they were going through. They don't deserve to live like that. So there were times I felt guilty, but I also thought of the situation they were living in. My priority was to protect my children's minds and their lives, and just to make sure that they live a normal life. They had gone through a lot of traumatic situations. I never wanted them to ever experience that again. We moved into the shelter with barely anything. We had just a few change of clothes, underclothes, shoes. We had all our things were still where we were. So finally, when we moved out, I rented a van to go pick up all of our things. And behold, we were told that my husband was no longer in that apartment and that there's nobody in that apartment. They said he moved out of that apartment, they don't know where he was. So the police officers I went with, they decided to find out from the housing. And they discovered that he moved into another apartment with somebody else in the same building. So they went there, and luckily they met him and asked him, confronted him that, where are my things? These were not only my things, every personal document, every personal thing I had, everything that belonged to these children. Their toys, albums, I mean everything. Everything that you know you can't have in the shelter. Clothes, shoes, jewelry, personal things, things that I keep as memories. He held on to my things until the ACS stepped in. ACS supervisor stepped in and did everything to get any one of our things, nothing till today. I stood there. I had maybe about 2 or 3 underwears with everything in that apartment. No clothes, nothing. The kids had nothing. All their dolls, all their bags, their everything, and our everything, personal everything till today. So we started off with basically nothing. So I came back with an empty van. That's when the ACS, since they were involved and they tried to take all these things from him, he didn't, and he decided to walk away from the children and from this country with everything till today. That's when the ACS decided to buy bunk beds and some clothes for the children. I have no relationship with him. I long washed my hands off that. The day I moved into the shelter was the day that it was over. After we separated, when we moved into the shelter, I decided to file for divorce. So at one point, I was battling with him in 4 different courts at once. I was divorce, family court, criminal court, child support court, all at once. I had no life at that time, but going back and forth like this, battling with him. For me to be able to move forward, I don't like keeping anything in here. I do everything not to hold any bitterness against anybody in here. I like saying this with a big smile because I'm so happy about how far I have come. And I always say how far we have come because I've come this far. It's not only me, it's 5 of us. We have come so far. And I'm just so happy because this is my second master's degree. And after being through so much and being at this point doing my master's degree, I would say it's just been about me telling myself that somebody's bad choices will not dictate my life. That somebody made the wrong choices, that affected me, but I'll not let that to control my life. So after all the chaos, moving into the shelter here and there, at the back of my mind, I knew that when I was growing up, I told myself that I was going to be a journalist. I will be telling stories and telling stories of ordinary people. And that was a dream I had growing up, and it never died. It never died, despite all this chaos that was going on in my life. Yeah. So while I was in the shelter, I was still like trying to do everything. While in the shelter, I applied, got accepted into Brooklyn College, and as I moved out of the shelter, I started that program there. And honestly, it was chaos, but I made it because I'm that person. When I'm going in for something, it's not just to pass. I always want to excel in everything that I do. Okay. So I was having 4 kids. Every day I'll have to drop them at the daycare. I'll have to take them to therapy. I'll have to do therapy. And I also have to go to school. So I started with 1 class. Going in as a second degree student, I would have done this program in 2 or 3 semesters the most. But I ended up doing 8 semesters because it was hard having to be taking care of my kids, making sure that they had everything that they needed and going to school at the same time. But I did it because I started with 1 course. And when it came to semesters that my children's schedules did not permit, I skipped. That's how I ended up doing like 8 semesters. Sometimes I'll not have the tuition. I did most of my homework, all assignments on the go. I ate on the go because I wanted to make it to where I am today. That's how I did it, and I ended up really graduating with a very good GPA because I set my eye on making it despite everything. And another reason that I made it was that I knew I had nobody. Yeah. So I was looking up to nobody. If I had help, thank you, I took it. But I wasn't like expecting anything, anywhere, from anybody at any time. So I just knew it was only me with the 4 kids by myself, and I had to do everything by myself. So that's how I was able to handle things. I'm just so happy because after all the trials and tribulations, my first daughter, who was 7 years old when we moved out and started wandering all over the place, she is now 18 and she's going to college. And she's going to do performing arts at Pace University. So I am over the moon with that because we've been through a lot. She has been through a lot, at times emotionally, but I think she is at a very good place now, and she's very focused on what she is after, and I believe she's going to succeed really well. And then the second one, my younger girl, the second daughter, she's in 12th grade now, and she'll be going to college next year. And she's very interested in business and fashion design. She is also very focused on that career that she wants to pursue. She's already like trying to create her own brand of fashion shoes that she would like to create. So she is also very focused. And then the third one, my older boy, he is going to 11th grade. He is that athletic one. He wants to play baseball and or basketball, but he wants to do communication, some kind of sports casting. So he would probably be doing like sports. He will be doing journalism and then focusing on sports. That's where he is like interested.
Right.
The little one we're still trying to figure out, because he's going to 8th grade now, so he'll be going to high school next year.
Okay.
He's rising 8th grade. We're still figuring out, but he's going more towards the sciences. So I think we've come so far, and we're doing good, very, very good. And I think we are aiming for the moon, and we will all reach there. I've never had any time for myself. My kids have never been anywhere. I've never been on any vacation. I've never had any moment in my life without my kids. And they have never had any moment, any day in their lives without me. The highest time that they have ever been away was when they went to camp. But they always went in sessions, so I always had two with me. I've never had any time just by myself and for myself. And I'm praying to Jesus for that day. I'm praying for that day. I've never had a vacation. I've never even gone to the beach, because I'm always like having so much to do, trying to catch up with this, catch up with everything. I always have my plate overflowing, and I'm just like trying to contain everything on my plate. So I've never had any time for myself. No, I've not dated, and it was my personal decision. My children needed me more than I needed a relationship. So it's some kind of a sacrifice. I like being loved. I like being in love. But it was a very hard decision for me to make, and I made that decision myself because I had my kids. And secondly, I didn't just want to bring anybody into my kids' lives without knowing whether this person can be that father figure who will not do what they just experienced. So I was very, very cautious getting into any relationship with my kids that young. So I decided not to date for this long, for a very long time. I decided not to date. I don't regret it. Sometimes I say I've missed a very good part of my life, a good chunk of my life. Then when I think about the reason why I missed it, I'll say no, it didn't go for nothing, because I didn't know what any crazy person could do to my kids. I don't want to be with somebody that I couldn't trust or just entrust my kids to.
Right.
So I decided not to date. And to be honest with you, it's hard to not date because it looks like at that time people want to date you, people see you, they like you, but it's very difficult, and I had to devise a lot of strategies to keep people off my back. I had to devise some crazy strategies, and one of the main strategies was lying. I lied a lot. It's a crazy strategy.
Yeah.
Yes, I've been lying to a lot of people. You know the kind of lies? That I'm still married. I can now.
Yeah.
I can now.
So-
Because my kids are grown now. Once you decide to get out of that situation, don't go back. If you know you would go back, don't leave. Because once you leave and go back, the situation becomes worse than when you left. So if you decide to leave, leave. Turn your back and never go back. I would also say, just know that you are not alone. There are many women going through the same situation. And I would say, when somebody knocks you down so hard, don't lie there cry, because that person who knocked you down will be celebrating. I'm not saying that you live your life to show somebody that whatsoever, but just make sure that you don't let that person's behavior to be in your life. Just do all that you can to make sure that you get your life for yourself. Never go back because you're desperate. Because when you go back, as I said before, it's worse, because they know this is a desperate person now who will be ready to take even more than they took before. Know that you can do it, and also know that you are worthy. You are not what the person who was abusing you made you to think you are. I was called all kinds of names. If somebody could die from being called names, I'm telling you, I would have been dead a long time ago, because I was called names, put down, called worthless, basically on a daily basis. You can do it. Just know that you can do it.
Okay.
I did it. Domestic violence is something that I call it a monster. Because when I look at what happens to my life that I never expected, I call it a monster. It's a destructive monster. It destroys children. It destroys homes. It destroys the society. Just think of how many people are being killed because of domestic violence. Many people die from domestic violence. And the mysterious thing about domestic violence is that it doesn't happen in the public. It happens behind closed doors. You never know what somebody is going through behind closed doors. That is the mystery. That is why domestic violence is so terrifying, because you don't know what somebody is going through. I'll just tell any other woman that you can do it. You can do it. Just be strong. You have little children, just be there for those children and be strong. I didn't know I could be where I am, but because I was determined that I would not go back to that. I was determined that I would make sure that my children, they have a normal life, and I fought it and beat it, and you can. Since the time that I experienced this monster, domestic violence has become something that is so close to my heart. Every time I hear that word, or I see somebody who has who is going through it, or who has been through it, I just feel like breaking down, because I understand it. I know what that is. So every time I keep asking myself, what can I do for this situation to be better, for people not to be experiencing this? So I contacted the New York State Office for the Prevention of Domestic Violence. So they have brochures, they have flyers, they have all kind of information that I do I request from them, and they send it to me in a box. So I distribute this information. The brochures have all the information that anybody going through domestic violence can use. Many of us experience it, we don't even know. Sometimes they'll ask, why didn't you leave? Why did you stay in this for so long? You don't even know that you are going through that. Many people don't even know the signs. So I do get all this material. I distribute it. I go to the library. Sometimes I'll go put these brochures and all these flyers at the library. Coming back to the library by midweek, they're all gone. That tells you how much people are using that information. That tells you that there's so many people who are experiencing it, but we don't know. And then this website that I told you I am putting up, it's like, I call it Women's Podium, like uplifting victims and survivors of domestic violence, where women who have been through domestic violence, women who are experiencing domestic violence, those who have survived and those who are still in there, they tell their stories so that other women who are still going through, when they hear these stories, these stories can uplift them, both mentally. They can hear something there that can help them, and they should know that they are not alone. It's just like a forum where you can come to get these stories, and they can just uplift you in any way. So that's one of the things that I'm doing. And this website will start with this story. This is how I went through it. This story can inspire somebody who is in it, thinking that, oh, my life is over. Your life is not over. Your life is not over. The person who abused you didn't create you. The person who abused you doesn't have your life. God created you, and God knows where your life will be. Women who are being abused, when they're moving out of the shelter, they have nothing. I was just thinking that if I could just be able to collect items, like cutlery, pots, just for women to start off with. Those are just the things that I'm thinking, because I've been there. I started with nothing. So that's just what I'm thinking that I'll do. I don't know how it's going to happen, but I believe it's going to happen. Yes, it's going to happen. And there are so many other things that I'm thinking that I will be able to do, but I think women don't deserve what men do to them. They don't deserve that.
That is for sure. Okay.